Hello everybody! In today's video, we're going to be wiring our two locomotive sheds with lights. So we're going to be taking our Tidmouth sheds here, and because this one has 5 bays, we're going to be wiring it with several lights, well not several, but 4 lights on the inside kind of fanning around. And then with our locomotive shed over here, we're going to put 1 light in there just to give it this nice glow on the inside. So let's remove the sheds and we'll show you what our ultimate plan is. Okay, with the sheds removed, let's show you what the ultimate plan is here. So you can see that the tracks with the little black end pieces here, those are the pieces of track that are inside the shed. So what our plan is to put a light bulb between each track. So not on the outside against the outside wall, because I think that might glare. The windows don't have kind of plastic or glass in them. So we want to keep the lighting kind of more in the interior. So between these tracks here, which is going to be 4 lights here, and then this is where the single engine shed was sitting, we'll drop a light in here. So the plan is to kind of wire a light harness and then pop the lights up from below here and then hook them into our terminal blocks where the rest of our accessories are plugged in. So what we'll do first is we'll take some measurements here. First, we need to know like how far apart the lights are going to be. So if we put the lights kind of at the end of the rails here, they're going to be about 7 inches apart, it looks like. So when we wire those, we'll make sure that where the light bulbs are wired into like kind of the main wire, which we'll point out when we do the wiring, those will be about 7 inches apart, because we want them to drop straight down below the table, and then we'll just run the whole run over to the accessory. And then, like I said, there'll be 1 light back here, so measurement doesn't really matter here. We'll just pop 1 light up there. The only thing is that when the main wire below has to be long enough to reach the accessory, the command center, as it were, where the accessories plug in. So, yeah, so let's, why don't we just go ahead and start wiring up our light harness, and then we'll install them. Okay, so to get started here, I'm starting off with my main wire here, show you what I'm doing. This is just some wire that I bought off of Amazon. This is 24 gauge wire here. I've got it in red and black. So I cut off, they're not connected, or, it's not a 2-wire thing. They're individual wires, as you can see. So I had to cut them off separately. And basically, I just cut off enough length to connect all our lights and also make a run back to the terminal block for the accessory connection for power. So it's going to be individual for you. When I cut this, I just want you to know that I don't cut it exactly the length I need. I always add a little bit of slack in there just because you never know if you're going to move things around or if you measured wrong or something like that. And all of this wire is going to be hidden under the table anyway, so you won't really be able to see it. But starting off here, we've got the end of our run here. This is going to connect to that single shed that's out there. It's kind of separated from the Tidmouth shed, so that needs a little bit of extra length. And then, so that needs about 11 inches. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to measure about 1 foot, really, just to make sure I have enough. And this is just a rough measurement, so basically right about here. So we're going to solder a light bulb to the end of this, so we'll do that at the end. But this is going to be our first kind of working back from the end of the run here at that shed, kind of working back along the wire to the side, to the part that's going to attach to the accessory for power. We're going to start off here with our first light bulb that's going to go into the Tidmouth sheds. And we're going to use those with these T-connectors here. These are T-connectors that we bought off of Amazon. And they're basically designed to allow you to tap into a wire with an accessory exactly like a light bulb. So these are the perfect application for these. And these will do gauge ranges between 20 and 24 or 22 and 24. But because this is all 24 gauge wire, this will work perfectly. And how they work is they flip open here, give you a look at that if the camera will focus on those. And you can see here there's a couple of channels that the 2 wires will run through, pass right through there. And then on the inside you'll see the electrical contacts. And what ends up happening is when you put the wires in and you press this down, you can see those little metal kind of blades there. They cut into the insulation on the wire and make that connection. And then the same thing down here. These open up. Now you notice that there's kind of two circular things in there. You're supposed to feed the wire into these, kind of like so. If that doesn't work, I've read on the internet, getting little hints, is that you can just kind of snap those little circle things off, and then usually it'll connect okay. But we'll try it the way it's meant to be, the way it's meant to work here, and then we'll adjust if we have to. But they just snap shut. You can see there's a little latch there. Put the wire in, snap it shut, and then kind of move on to the next one. So that is going to be our plan here. And then for our wire, we have our yellow lights here. These wires are a little bit too long. We'll probably cut those back. Maybe not. Maybe I won't. Like I said, I like the extra slack in there. You never know if you want to move them up in the shed or down. These are going to pass through the plywood on the shed, on the layout, sorry. And that plywood's only 3/4 of an inch thick. And when we put them on, you'll see how that works. And they'll pop up, and then we'll have enough slack if we want to keep them low, put them up high, who knows. So we'll keep that. So anyway, the first thing we're going to do is attach our first light bulb. So again, we're going to measure about 12 inches down, just because that's about right here. Because again, this is going to be our first light bulb, and this light bulb here is going to be for these single shed. All right. So basically, you're just going to place these, and my hands are going to be in the way. I apologize for that. But basically, you just open that up. Your black wire goes in the bottom channel, and your red wire goes in the top channel. And then you'll just kind of see how they just kind of fit in those little grooves there. We haven't snapped it shut yet, but you can see how they kind of place in there. And then once you get them in place, just snap until you hear that latch. I don't know if you heard that latch. It was a little teeny click. And then if you don't get a click, or if you're using a wire gauge that's a little bigger than you should be using, you can always take a little pair of pliers and just kind of give that a squeeze until that latch connects. Okay? Now for our bottom light here, let's make sure we got about a foot there. Okay, so now for our yellow light, or for our yellow bulb here, the color, so this yellow wire here is because it's a yellow light. I think that's the only reason. So you have a black with the black here, a yellow with the red, and if I can show you a previous light bulb we did here, this is just important to point out, is that you'll see the pattern here. This is a clear light bulb, so it has red and black. But the color wire, in this case it's red, but in this case it's yellow, goes on the left. So when you're wiring these up, on your main wire, red goes on the top, black goes on the bottom. When you put your bulb in, the red goes on the left, the black goes on the right. Or in this case here, the yellow will go on the left and the black will go on the right. Okay? So again, this is super easy. We'll put our wires right into those little channels there. We'll lift that door up a little bit. And you can push them right into the end. Oops. I almost said exactly what I said not to do. Almost did exactly what I said not to do. Okay, so they're up there. And then we'll go ahead and, oops, that one slid out. Don't let them slide out. And these ones here, you actually might need the pliers for a little friendly persuasion here. And you heard that click into place, maybe, hopefully. But yeah, that's how they work. Now we could go ahead and test this. Why don't we go ahead and test this theory here before we move on? Okay, so now that we have our first light attached here, we just want to make sure that everything is going to work okay. We don't want to complete our light string only to find out that nothing works. So what I'm going to do here is just take the end of the wire that's going to end up connecting to the accessory on our power supply, and I'm just going to go ahead and strip a little wire off of that, if it will strip. Doesn't look like it really wants to. This might be just a very super narrow gauge wire here. So we're just going to go ahead and pull that out. this won't be the permanent connection. This is, again, I'm just untwisting this here just as a test. So we're going to go ahead and pop this on the accessory real quick here. Okay, so with our, again, this is just kind of a quick and dirty setup here. We've got our accessories hooked up. We'll turn the power on, and then if we pan over here, you'll see our light bulb is going on. So yeah, so that's gonna, I think our little T's are gonna work pretty well here. So we'll go ahead and we'll finish up our T's, and then we'll do the end light for that final end shed. And then we'll make a connector that'll be nice for the power supply. The terminal block that we're using for power supplies, and I think that'll work good. And then yeah, we'll be able to push up the lights from below and check them out. Okay, one thing that I'm also going to do here while I haven't hooked up all of my lights yet is that these are two separate wires, and I don't want them dangling separately apart like this. I'd kind of prefer the wire that's kind of two strands together where the insulation is attached, but we don't have that. And like I say, we like to use the things that we have on hand. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to slide these shrink wrap or these shrink insulators right onto the wire here. And I'm not going to use them to insulate the wires, like, you know, to cover an open connection, like a soldered connection. I actually will at the other end of that, but not for this. What I'm using these for is I am going to kind of keep the wires together with it. So I'm going to put on a few of these, and I'm going to put them in between every single light bulb. So here I'm just kind of running it down. So basically what will end up happening here is I'll use these, I'll just shrink wrap them, and it'll hold the wires together. So I'm going to put on a bunch of those right now, and then we'll go for the rest of our T's, or the rest of our lights that are connected to those T's. Okay, so we said that we wanted 4 lights for the Tidmouth shed, and they're going to be about 7 inches apart. So we're going to take our tape measure and just kind of go down 7 inches. So that's going to put us right about here. Now here are these little shrink things. I just put a whole bunch of them on. But what I do want to, I'm just going to slide those out of the way. We do want one in between every light bulb. Now the little heat shrink things aren't essential. There's just something I do to neaten up the wires, keep them together, that type of thing. So let's get our next T here. I just like to pre-open them up because sometimes they can be a little bit problematic opening them up. But these are opening up pretty good. I've had a couple that got stuck and the tabs kind of broke away. So again, I think I just want to remeasure here real quick. So right about here. So again, we want our red wire on top, black wire on the bottom. And again, I apologize if my hands are in the way. Working with small things like this, it can get really hard to, you know, keep things on camera. But again, just make sure that the wires are in their appropriate channels and they look like they are. I'm trying to show you as best as I can without letting go of the little thing here. And again, we got our little measure twice, cut once rule here. So we're at about 7 inches. That's good. So I'm just going to go ahead and squeeze these in. And you can kind of hear the little clip. If you make a mistake, by the way, you can just pry that free. And I'm not going to do that here. I'm just kind of clamping down a little bit to make sure that the lever got a nice grip. But yeah, you can actually, if you need to, you can release those and redo it. Okay, then our second light here. We're going to throw the black wire. Again, that one goes on the right. Yellow wire on the left into those little holes. And then give it a clamp. This one here is so small I can't really get a good grip with my fingers, so that's why I'm going to use the pliers on that one. But that looks like a good connection there. We're not going to test this one here because we already tested this one successfully. That one worked out pretty good. So we'll just keep going, and we'll finish up, and then we'll do one final test of the 4 lights, and then we'll go ahead and put that last light on because we'll need the soldering iron for that. So we'll go ahead and put these other 2 lights on, and we'll catch you on the other side. All right, so we have our 4 Tidmouth shed lights hooked up here. And so we've got it all hooked up over here on our power supply here just to run a quick test. So we'll go ahead and turn that on. And we've got light on all 4. So that's good. So that's our Tidmouth shed section done. And now we just have to go over to the end here and solder a wire onto the end of that for the standalone shed. And then we'll be ready to install. All right, so lastly, we have our end of the run down here, and we're going to solder a light to that. So we're going to go ahead and strip away some insulation, and then we're going to do what we call tinning the ends here. These ends look tinned already, but we still need to expose a little bit more wire there. So we're going to take our trusty wire strippers here and give those a quick strip. Again, just to kind of expose a little bit more wire there. And then what we'll do here is we're just going to go ahead and tin these up. And tinning just means we're not actually connecting 2 wires together. We're not connecting these 2 wires together. We're just suspending them there a little bit. But what we're going to do here is just use our soldering iron here. And this is tip tinner for the soldering iron. So we'll just burn that in there. And that kind of does a little, that tins the end of the soldering iron. See that nice silver color there? Then we're going to take a little solder here, burn some on, and then just kind of put it on the wire here. And that also keeps the wire from, if it's a stranded wire, kind of keeps it from. So that's a nice little tinning job right there. I have a tendency to overdo things, but I think that should be good right there. Then we have to take our, where's the end of our wire here? We'll take that out. We lost our insulation here. We don't want to lose that because that's going to cover the joint once we're done soldering. But let's take a little bit off of here if this will let us. We're not really having much luck stripping. Oh, there we go. Nice. That's stripped. That's stripped good. Let's get a little bit more off of that. There we go. That's going to work good. So what we're going to do is twist those strands. And we'll go ahead and tin those. And again, tinning is just getting a little solder on there. All right. Then the next thing we're going to do is solder our bulb. Find the bulb. Let me find the bulb I just tinned. Now what we're going to do here is, just so we don't make a mistake, remember we want to go black to black, right? And then color to color. So I'm going to take this off of here. I'm going to put these together as best as I can. These arms are really great for this type of thing here. And kind of hold those together. Our soldering technique probably isn't the best. We don't solder that often, so we don't really have a call to do it. But let's see what we can come up with here. We should have probably fluxed that a bit. Maybe we don't have to. Looks like our wires are separating there a little bit. Let's go ahead and let that cool for a second. Oops, they separated again. All right, next up is the color to color. That looks like that might do it. Okay, so we have our black wires connected. We have our colored wires connected. Let's just do a quick test to make sure that everything works okay. And there we go. So our last shed light is working pretty good. And then our other four, you can see them kind of on the bench here, lying there. So yeah, so I think we got all of our lights are working. So the next step will be to put a connector on the other end to go into the terminal blocks. And then, yeah, we'll drill some holes and put the lights up into the sheds and we'll be ready to go. Okay, so the final step before completing our wires here is we put these, as you remember, I put these little heat shrink insulators here. So these two here, I want to cover up the soldering joint that we just made on the light bulb to the connector, or the light bulb to the main wire here. So just take those and just kind of slide them up over the soldered joint here, covering both insulators, or covering the insulation on both wires. See that fit nice. We'll do this one as well. There we go. And then the other thing we'll do is we'll just place these. Remember, we put these on just to hold the wires together. So I think I'll put that on right there. And then this one here is kind of halfway between. This one's halfway between. See the spacing here. And then this one is halfway between. And then how you get those to close up is just grab your heat gun or heat source. This is my Porta-Cable, or our Porta-Cable heat gun here. We've done a lot with this. This works really good. So we're going to go ahead and spark it up. And then you'll watch as I apply the heat to it, you'll see these things shrink right up around the wire. And once they're shrunken on there, they won't move. Then one more test just to make sure that we didn't loosen anything up, especially with these soldered connections here, but you can see our light works just fine. And the rest of them do too. Okay, so for the end of the wire that's going to connect to the power supply or to the terminal blocks, if you remember from our last video, the terminal blocks, the best way to connect those are with these fork connectors right here. Now this, I haven't had good luck crimping fork connectors onto wire that small of a gauge here, this 24 gauge wire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try something a little bit different here. So what I've done is I've kind of doubled over an end of the wire here. As you can see, there's like a little loop there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tin this together with some solder to kind of thicken it up and stabilize it, stabilize the strands, and then I'm going to crimp it on there and see what kind of luck we have with that. This is probably totally overkill, but we're going to give it a shot anyway. So let's just go ahead and quickly tin this wire here. And again, tinning with stranded wire is really good because it gives you a nice, solid kind of base to work from. And while we're at it, we'll go ahead and take the red end and do the same thing. So what I basically did was just opened up a bunch of strands there, or opened up a bunch of wire, and I'm just kind of doubling it over on itself. Again, to thicken it up, just to give it more of a grip when we put it into the crimp it into the the fork connector. So let's go ahead and tin this up here. Looking good. Again, probably totally over-engineering this, but then we're going to grab our iCrimp crimpers here. Open those up. And then we'll put our fork connector on here. That's looking pretty good. Now I think I'll release this from here. I can probably hold it better. You don't want too much wire sticking out of there, if any at all, but you can see there's just a little bit of a nub sticking out there. You don't want the inside here. You want to make sure that the insulation doesn't go into the barrel. That's the metal, cylindrical thing inside the connector there. You've probably already have seen connectors. And then we're going to pop it in the connector here. In the crimper. I think that's where I want it, right about there. Let's give it a crimp. Right to the bottom. Oh yeah, got a nice solid connection there. I like that technique. So basically, again, because this wire is so thin, I find that it doesn't really accept a crimp very well. They always kind of work their way loose. So my technique here that I just invented for this video is to take some of that extra wire, double it over to kind of double the thickness, tin the stranding so that you don't have any loose strands hanging out there. And then put on your crimp. I probably didn't invent that. I'm sure there's a lot of people who might do the same thing. This can be kind of tough to do. I know he can't get a good camera angle here, but basically, good idea with your crimper is to get that first notch in there. Actually, let me just redo this real quick here. It's not really seating right. Rather than try to get the wire and the crimp at the same time, what you can also do here is put your connector in there first. Make sure the barrel there, that you can maybe see the silver in there, right under the jaws there. Now the proper way to crimp is, let me just kind of back up here for a second, is that there inside the cylinder there's an open end of that barrel that allows it to kind of slide over each end. That should ideally be down in the U of the crimp. So I think the bottom of the barrel is actually right there. So rather than kind of rush through this, I'll show you the proper way to do it. And then I just kind of crimped it to the first level, so it's not going to let go. These are ratcheting crimpers, so they won't release until the crimp is complete. So then we're going to stick our wire, make sure it's through that barrel, and you can see it kind of sticking out there on the end. We only want a little bit out. And then let's give it our crimp. And that one's pretty good too. I don't think that's going anywhere. So yeah, so that's going to make the connection with our terminal block. Okay, and just because I am just an absolute nut about testing every step of the way, because every electrical connection can be a failure point. Before we get this out on the layout, I just wanted to test my my fork connector crimps, so that when they finally connect to the power supply, they'll power the lights, and sure enough, the lights are all lighting up. So again, I test every step of the way just to make sure I don't have to go back and redo something. So, you know, you can make those calls on your own, but I think we're all set to go. I think it's time to head out to the layout and get these things hooked up. Okay, so with the lights kind of laid out here on top of the layout, you can kind of see what we're going for now. So we're going to have a light coming up, and we decided to space them kind of like right where the gray track meets the black track. So there'll be a hole here, there'll be a hole here, there'll be a hole here, and a hole here, and then further over here there'll be a hole here for the separate shed there. So you can see our spacing here. There was about a foot or 11 inches between this track here and this track here, so that's why we had the, you know, the foot here to the first light for the Tidmouth shed, and then the second light 7 inches apart. Because as they fanned out, that's about where it played. And you can see these are going to be plenty long because they only have to come up through 3/4 of an inch of plywood here. And all this wire will be hidden under the table. We're just lying it on top here just so you can kind of see how this is going to play out. And then finally over here, our fork connectors. This is again just kind of lying on the layout here, but this will be under the table, and this is what will run to our terminal blocks. So the next step here is to drill holes at those spacings that I told you about just a second ago, and then we'll bring the wire under the table and put it up from the bottom. So to do that, we want to make sure that we have a drill bit. We don't want to create big holes. As a matter of fact, this is an old hole that we have to fill in from another project. We're not going to use that one, but it's under the shed anyway, so you can't really see it. But we want a drill bit that's just a little bit larger than the diameter of the light bulb, and that'll give it just enough room to kind of slide up from the bottom without making the hole too big. So the next step is to drill the holes, and then we'll bring the wire under the table and push the light bulbs up. So before he drills, what he's doing is he's just making an X in the grass mat. And what that does is just provide some relief so that when the drill bit starts to spin, if it grabs onto the grass mat, it's not going to want to take it all up. You know, it'll just basically just flap around in that little X he's creating. We don't want the drill bit gathering up our grass mat there as it spins. So he's going to do a little X through the grass mat for every hole that we're going to drill. All right, so you can see the drill bit that we're going to use is just a little bit bigger diameter than the light bulb itself. You can see that kind of dangling there. But now this isn't, again, kind of scientific. Just get as close as you can. But it can't be too small, otherwise the bulb won't pass through. So it's got to be at least a little bit bigger diameter than the light bulb. All right, let's get to drilling. And he's going all the way through. All right, next step is to clean up that sawdust, and then we'll push the lights up from below. All right, here comes the first one. Okay. Here comes the second one. Put the dowel in? Yeah, you can put the dowel in if you want. You see how that holds it up?
Oh, yeah. far do you want them sticking up? Just
Oh, we can adjust that when I come up. Okay, as you can see, we stuck the bulbs up through the holes. And we also stuck, if you saw, a little piece of dowel in between the wires, but over the hole. And what that'll do is, I don't think this is gonna be a problem. I think those bulbs will stay up just fine. But that's just in case they get pulled down, they won't be pulled back through the hole. The dowel will kind of hold them up above the level of the table. So, like I said, I don't think we need them. The wires seem to be sticking up there pretty good. But the next step now is to go ahead and hook the remaining wires, the power wires, up to our accessories. So that'll be the next step. Okay, so the last thing that needs to be done is to connect our main wire to the power supply. And so what he's going to do is attach our wires to the terminal blocks marked accessories, and one wire will go on each side. So he's just going to take off the covers that are labeled accessories. They just pull right off. We covered terminal blocks in our last video where we were doing the rewiring. Maybe we'll do one solely on terminal blocks in the future. But at any rate, I'm going to give the wires to him. Those are the ones that we just put the fork connectors on. So he's going to loosen that one right up. And it should just slide in. There's two plates on those terminal blocks. Again, we covered this in the last video, that the fork should just slide right between, and then you just clamp the screw down right on top of them and sandwich them right in. You don't have to over tighten, just enough to kind of get it seated with a solid connection. Okay, there's one. So this could actually be a follow-up to our last video where we did the terminal blocks to make it super easy to connect accessories in the future. So this lighting project is a future project from when we did the rewiring, and you can see how easy it is just to go ahead and hook that stuff right up. And that looks like it's pretty solid, so he's going to pop those accessory covers back on. All right, we'll push everything back in place and we'll give it a test. All right, with everything connected and our power supply turned on, you can see we've got light. All right, so there's our lighting effect. We have 4 bulbs inside the Tidmouth sheds, and then we have a single bulb in that side shed there, the single shed. They could probably stand to, I don't know what you guys are saying, but they could probably stand to be a little brighter. So we may play around with that. But at any rate, this is our lighting project. We got some light in the sheds. I think they look pretty good, but like I said, we may want to brighten it up over time. The one good thing is that if we ever wanted to change the lights, we can simply, with those T connectors, we can simply release the yellow bulbs and put in something a little brighter if we want to. But we took a chance with these yellow bulbs thinking that they would create like a warmer lighting effect. And I think for the most part, they do create a warm effect inside the sheds. So yeah, we're gonna call this one a success. It might need a little bit more tweaking later on, but yeah, that's how we went about putting lights in our Tidmouth sheds from the Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends universe, and then our single engine shed there off to the right. That's also a Thomas building, but I'm not sure what the name of that shed is. But at any rate, hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll talk to you later.